The Pokemon card game likes to give us some very obvious combos at times. For example, in the most recent Pitch Black set, there was a archetype called Hide and Sneak, or Ghost Veil if you're a normal person, because nobody calls it Hide and Sneak. But the idea was, you have a bunch of Pokemon with the ability Hide and Sneak, and the more of them you discard, the more powerful attacks you unlock. If you have 4 in the discard, you unlock Delmise. If you have 6 in the discard, you unlock Sinister. If you have 13 in the discard, you unlock Spiritomb, which is the closer. It is kind of a box deck, but that's besides the point. What happens if we were to take these very obvious synergies and strip any form of synergy away from it and just put it into different decks? Well, let's find out. You know, ever since the incident, I've been in a very Dragapult stage in my life. And I know, you like to play the meta, you're a meta slave. No, I am practicing for the World Championships, and Dragapult just happens to be one of my favorite Pokemon as well. I mean, like, how can you not love this guy, right? He shoots his kids out of his head at Mach speeds and they enjoy it, right? He is a literal horrible single parent, but is still awesome, right? So shout out that guy. But Dragapult is pretty good. However, I haven't been playing the most standard Dragapults. Obviously, recently there's been the Dragapult Crushing Hammers, Dragapult Dust Noir, Dragapult Blazing and Chicken, whatever it's called. I've been playing something a little bit more sinister, a little bit more horrible, right? So the new Hide and Sneak Pokemon, I've put Hide and Sneak into Dragapult. There's no easy way to say it. I put Hide and Sneak into Dragapult, and I played a tournament in Korea with Hide and Sneak Dragapult, and I did pretty well, right? I did pretty well. I ended up going 3-1, but we'll go over the tournament in a bit. For now, let's take a look at the Abomination. Let's take a look at the actual deck list. And this is what I played. Definitely lots of tweaks I would like to make. First of all, shout out to the person I found, I got the idea from on Twitter. I don't know what list they were playing, but shout out to them for the idea. I didn't save the tweet, so if you see it on Twitter, then shout out that guy, right? But the idea was there, and then I went to the card shop and just bought whatever cards I needed to kind of make this whole thing a reality. And the idea is that you don't have Badoo in the early game anymore. You kind of just have Bayonet in the early game, so you want to go first, still you have your Shuppet, and then you have your Bayonet, and you start attacking with Bayonet on your second turn. You start taking prize cards, or you start spreading damage, and you start cherry-picking cards out of your deck, because Bayonet is really strong. When it lets you attack, it searches cards out of your deck. The nice thing about Bayonet is that it advances your board state. Badoo slows the game down, but unless you have stuff on the bench that like Dracloaks, you're not doing anything with that Badoo other than just waiting to die, right? But the nice thing about Bayonet is that if you don't have a Dracloak on the bench, or if you have a bad hand, you can get a better hand with the Bayonet, right? Getting whatever you need. So it's a bit more aggressive, because you're obviously attacking and taking prize cards, but it's also kind of like, it's not just blindly taking a knockout, it's also, preparing stuff for future turns. For example, you can take a knockout, then get on face stamp with Bayonet, and then the Bayonet will go down, and then you can on face stamp your opponent on the next turn. Or if your hand is just dead, you can go ahead and grab a Lily or something like that, or go ahead and grab a Gwyn or whatever, right? It's pretty decent, right? And then since you're playing 9 hide and sneak Pokemon, you're also playing Delmise, right? Delmise is also pretty good. It's not a hide and sneak Pokemon, but it has that attack, that Vengeful Anchor, that does 30 damage or 170 damage if you have 4 or more hide and sneak Pokemon in the discard pile. And 170 damage is actually really cool. So the idea is that you do 170 damage with the Vengeful Anchor to a bunch of different Pokemon, and you bring in Dragapult to close out the game and take multiple knockouts like everywhere, right? But it also kind of feels a little bit more like Lost Box in a way. Less of the Lost Box type, but more in the sense that you're a one prize deck and have attackers that you can use in different situations, and then you kind of close out the game with these bigger attackers. Like in Lost Box you had Charizard and Sableye, but in this deck you have Ursaluna or Dragapult, right? And that's the nice thing, is that I think there is kind of a synergy with these decks, not doing too much damage, because you can stay in this one prize board state and deal 170 damage to something else. You can boss up something else, deal 170 damage to that, then you can kind of deal 80 somewhere, and then you can bring in Dragapult and just take 4 prize cards, and then bring Ursaluna and take the last 2 prize cards, or however way you want to do it. But that's kind of the idea, right? And there's definitely a lot of different ways you can play around this. Obviously there's a Sinister, which puts 40 damage onto everything, and I think that card is really good. I think I definitely would like to incorporate that card into this deck, because then you can just spread damage wherever you want and then bring in Dragapult and just have even more power with Dragapult. Who needs anything else when you have Dragapult, right? But let's take a look at, I think, what is the core identity of the deck, the Dracloaks, right? The deck, Hide and Sneak, usually functions on two different aspects. One, 10 trillion supporter cards, right? And that's pretty cool. Problem is, you're not going to have 10 trillion turns to play all these supporter cards, right? Sometimes you just want a boss, but sometimes you also want to draw cards. And you can't do that at the same time if you're only playing 4 Lilies, 4 Gwyn's, 4 Explorer's Guidance, and 2 Boss's Orders, right? You're going to have to pick one and use one on that turn. But then you have got the Dunsparce, right? It sounds like I'm stuttering, but his name is actually the Dunsparce. So, also, if you have a stutter, how do you say the Dunsparce? Just Dunsparce. Is that insensitive? I hope not. Anyway, the problem with Dunsparce, or the Dunsparce, is that it loses to Watchtower plus Disruption, right? And that's the problem with these one-prize decks, is that you don't have much, like, on-board draw power, right? Is that when you need the Dunsparce, you have to constantly set it up. It's not a passive draw engine, it's an active draw engine, right? You have to evolve it, use the ability, find the basic again, and then next turn evolve it again, right? And if you evolve it and don't use it, you're losing that draw for that turn, and then you also, like I said, yeah, you're losing the ability to set it back up. Like, sure, you can prep it for future turns, but the thing is with Dracloak is that you don't have to prep it for future turns. Once it's there, and you're constantly seeing 2 cards every single turn. If you have 3 Dracloaks, you're seeing the same amount of cards as you would with 2 Dunsparces every single turn. And it's 2 extra cards, but the thing is that it's honestly less cards than the Dunsparce, because with the Dunsparce, you have to constantly set them back up, whereas the Dracloaks are just there, right? Obviously, there are some negatives, like the Dracloak has less HP, you don't actually draw 3 cards whenever you use the Dracloak, but the thing is, over time, you'll eventually draw more cards with the Dracloaks than you would with the Dunsparce. And then on top of that, it doesn't lose to Watchtower, right? Like I said, Disruption plus Watchtower just kills any form of the Dunsparce deck, right? And when you're a one-prize deck and you can't really miss too many turns of attacking, you really would like to not lose to Disruption, especially when Disruption is a big part of the game in decks like Dragapult, right? Dragapult is playing Unfazed Stamp as the most common ace spec. Lots of decks are playing Special Red Card. So you don't want to just lose these decks because, oh, you didn't set up a Dunsparce that turn, right? And then Watchtower. Watchtower is another really big threat for this deck because your engine is a colorless Pokemon, and every deck right now is playing Meowth or Dunsparce or Kangaskhan or Trumbeak, whatever, the big Trumbeak, Toucannon, right? All these decks are playing colorless Pokemon that have drawn. I don't know why Pokemon has decided to make every single draw engine colorless, right? And then be like, haha, it also gets turned off by the singular stadium that Dragapult will run. But also Dragapult doesn't need a colorless draw engine because we like Dragapult more than the rest of you guys. Look, I'm fine with that. You know what? I like Dragapult. Dragapult was one of my favorite Pokemon when he first came out, because the thought of him just being a shit dad, I don't know why, but I thought that was so funny that Pokemon decided, hey, we're gonna make a Pokemon and base it upon a bad parent. I was like, eureka, this is awesome. Anyway, right, also, if Dragapult had a partner, who would Dragapult get married to? I think Gardevoir, right? Because that whole Gardevoir Dragapult rivalry. I think, but yeah, anyway, back to the actual topic of the video. So Dragapult, right? Dragapult is also in the deck. He is a one-of in the deck and usually the closer. We could include 2, but you're never really using more than 1 Dragapult in a game, so I don't think you need more than 1. And then also, don't even get me started on the energy, right? Crispin was probably the worst card in this entire deck, because every time I saw Crispin, I didn't use it. It was such a bad card, because you don't play that many basic energies, and on top of that, you only attack with Dragapult at the end of the game. So in what world are you ever going to get value out of Crispin? Your deck has 3 cards, and it's probably the last 3 pieces you need to win the game, and all your energies are in your hand or in the discard pile, right? Emphasis on the discard pile. The nice thing about Rose's encouragement, or management, I don't remember what the card is called, it lets you get the energy from the discard pile onto your stage 2 Pokemon, bam, right? And it lets you get 2. So if you have a Pokemon in active that needs to retreat, you can attach to retreat that, and also get the Rosa up and active in that same turn. Bam! So cool, so calm, and so collected. Speaking of retreating though, we do have quite a few fat Pokemon in this deck, like Blood Moon Ursaluna, he kinda sleepy. And Delmise, it's an anchor, like, I don't know what you're expecting, of course it has a high retreat, it's literally an anchor. The whole idea of an anchor is to not move. Of course, that thing should have a 500 retreat cost, right? It shouldn't be able to retreat. But that's how we play Latinas, right? Latinas lets us move the fat guys out of the active and all that kind of jazz. So we do play a few more liabilities than you would want. We play the Latinas, we play the Meowth, because I wasn't playing Meowth originally, but Ultra Ball for Meowth would have made the tournament a lot easier for me. It would have made the entire tournament run a lot more calm, a lot more cool, and a lot more collected. Cool, calm, and collected. So, you know, if you're playing for Ultra Ball, you may as well play Meowth. I don't know why I wasn't playing Meowth originally. And then we're playing the Bear and the Clefairy, because Clefairy knockout Dhelmise Clefairy Dhelmise knockout Dragapult is still a pretty cool play. And then also you can attack with the Clefairy if you pre-attach to it, right? That's the one thing that I thought the Christmas would be cool for, is you can attach to the, like, Clefairy, you can attack with the Clefairy, or the Ursaluna, you can attack with Ursaluna a bit faster, but in the end it didn't really show up at all. Maybe it's a bit better if you play the Meowth as well, but I think Rose is probably just better, because that entire, like, part of the deck, I think, is just dedicated to Dragapult. And then there's a few other things that, like I said, I wouldn't mind including. One of those would be a Pheasantipity, because Pheasantipity, but if we're not talking about Pheasantipity, I think the Sinistcha would be pretty cool. But let's talk about the tournament run. So, round 1, I played against Hide and Sneak, and we both got off to a... Okay, all 4 of these games, every time I looked at my opening hand, I just sighed. But 3 of these 4 games, I top-decked something good, right? In the first game, I played against Hide and Sneak. I went second, and my opponent had 2 turns which weren't too great. I had 2 turns which weren't too great, but I was able to start attacking before he was, and Bayonet clutched up. I top-decked Bayonet. Bayonet knocked out one of his little guys, and I started going from there, right? And from there, I was up 4 prize cards to 6 prize cards, but this is where, you know, the 2 prize aspect of my deck came in, is because I pivoted into Dragapult a bit early, because that's all I had. I had Bayonet into Dragapult. That was my kind of attack thing. And then he went Clefairy into Dhelmise, knock out my Dragapult. Now we're on 4 prize cards. And then I whiffed the knockout, and I was like, oh, I've lost, right? Because now he's on 3 prize cards, I'm on 4 prize cards, and he also has a Legacy Energy Dhelmise. But I was able to chain Boss's Orders twice, and I was able to... so I knocked out a Dhelmise that didn't have the Legacy Energy, then he forced up the Legacy Energy Dhelmise, and then I gusted around that to take 1 more prize card, and I was on 2 prize cards, he was on 1 prize card, he thought he won the game, but then I bossed up the Clefairy, Ursaluna, bang, 0 energy knockout onto the Clefairy. And that was quite cool, right? Then game 2 I played against Dragapult, and don't even ask me about that matchup. That was the one I didn't top deck anything to get me out of that situation. Moving on, my first deck search was on the 4th turn, right? I got Thundercunted. It was not a good game. Then we had game 3, which was against Arboliver, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought this matchup was really bad, mainly because I attached past, then next turn benched something else that I wouldn't, you know, lose the game because I didn't have benched Pokemon, and he went to Arboliver and left me with a Bayonet that had 10 HP left, and that was my board state, right? And then from there, I played Lily, drew nothing except a Pokepad, right? And then, I had a Dreepy and a Pokepad, and I was like, this isn't good. Played the Pokepad, realized I play Shaman, thumbs up emoji, benched the Shaman, my opponent, and from there, things started looking up. He was forced to take out my 1 HP Shuppet, not Bayonet. And then from there, I knocked out another Tiamat's Gogapon, which is cool, and then he was on 1 prize card, I was on 2 prize cards, he thought he won the game, bam, Ursaluna boss, GG's. Right, and the last game was against Dragapult Blaziken, and yeah, he had a slow start, I had a slow start, I top decked Lily though, and then I was able to get into Dragapult turn 3, and just wipe out his board basically, right, and just constantly spawn kill things. So, I think the deck is pretty good. I'll probably do a gameplay video on it a bit later, but yeah, that's about it.